morning, everyone, and welcome to the Atlantic Council. My name is Mike Anderson. I'm an executive at Saab, as well as a board director here at the Atlantic Council. On behalf of Saab and the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, as well as its Forward Defense Program, I would like to welcome you to this third installment of our 2024 Commander Series, featuring the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, Jr. Over the past few years, the world has experienced a fast-changing security environment. Russian revisionism, threats emanating from the People's Republic of China, and the weaponization of emerging technologies is challenging the global security. The United States and its allies must prevail despite these developments, requiring a robust and capable military force. The conversations today will discuss the challenges the joint forces faces today and what to expect in the years ahead. General Brown will also focus on how to prioritize efforts across the joint force to meet these challenges and ensure military readiness and resiliency amidst global conflict. In this spirit, meetings such as these are integral to the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, which works to develop sustainable, nonpartisan strategies to address the most important security challenges facing the United States and its allies and partners. A little bit about the Commander Series. Saab and the Atlantic Council launched the Commander Series back in 2009. Our vision was to establish a flagship speakers forum for the senior military and defense leaders to discuss the most important security challenges both now and in the future. The program has over the years become one of the Council's institutions. This series has been very useful for defense companies like Saab, and Saab in particular, helping us better understand challenges and priorities to inform our investments and partnerships. It is insights from these discussions that has influenced Saab's decision to expand our investments in the U.S. defense industrial base by opening a new aerospace facility in Indiana for the U.S. Air Force T-7A Red Hawk program, opened an autonomous and undersea division in Rhode Island, and just inaugurated an innovation accelerator named SCAPA in San Diego. And currently, we're evaluating the best location to build a new advanced manufacturing facility and center of innovation for weapon systems to enhance U.S. munition production capacity. Today's event is the third installment of the Commander Series this year. We hosted General Sir Jim Hockenhull of the UK Strategic Command in April, and General Christopher Cavoli, Commander of the U.S. European Command and Supreme Allied Commander Europe, earlier this month. But today, we're really excited to welcome General Brown back to the Commander Series. We had the pleasure of hosting General Brown for the first time in 2021 in his capacity as Chief of Staff of the Air Force. General, thank you for spending time with us again today. We appreciate it very much. As Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Brown serves as the nation's highest-ranking military officer and the principal military advisor to the President, Secretary of Defense, and the National Security Council. General Brown was commissioned in 1984 as a distinguished graduate of the Reserve Officers Training Course program at the Texas Tech University. He has served in a variety of positions at squadron wing levels and is a command pilot with more than 3,000 flying hours, including 130 combat hours. Notably, General Brown has commanded a fighter squadron, the U.S. Air Force Weapons School, 2 fighter wings, U.S. Air Force Central Command, Pacific Air Forces, and served as a Deputy Commander of the U.S. Central Command. Prior to serving as the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Brown, as I mentioned earlier, was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Moderating today's conversation is Courtney Kuby, who serves as a correspondent, covering national security and the military for the NBC News Investigative United, and she has covered national security since 2001. Thank you again for joining us today, and now we'll turn it over to you, Courtney.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope that everyone who's watching this online was able to see that lovely slideshow that they put together. It's a little bit of like, this is your life for you, nice. You know?
Hey, I forgot to text my parents.
Yeah, you have to. Hopefully, I'm sure there'll be a way to watch it online. So. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being here. As we just heard, this is your first time here as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. It's been about 8 months, and I imagine our audience knows this, but I think some people might be a little bit surprised to hear that you were sworn in as Chairman, and 1 week later were the attacks of October 7th. So I want to start by asking, how did that day, and how has everything I guess, that's happened since then, how the world, we've just heard about this security environment that's so fast moving in the world right now. How has that shaped the job so far for you as chairman?
Well, thank you to the Atlantic Council, and thank you, Courtney, for sitting down with me today. You know, you did mention it was 1 week after I became the chairman. Hamas went into Israel, but I would also say it was 1 week prior to me becoming the chairman when I got confirmed.
Yeah.
So it was actually a pretty fast move into the position and into a dynamic environment. But I will also tell you that I felt well prepared, just based on the various jobs I've had, what the Air Force had done to prepare me, the opportunity to work in the joint environment, and also work a lot with our allies and partners. It was a phone call about 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, the 7th of October, that got this all started. And not surprising, having served in jobs before, we've gotten phone calls in the early in the morning, in the middle of the night. The first thing that I tend to do is just kind of slow down for a minute, because you got to take care of the first, get the first report, and then start thinking through the things you're going to have to address. And then from then on, it just was a lot of engagement between myself with the Joint Staff, myself with the Secretary, and then also with the White House, but also particularly with General Kurilla in United States Central Command. And having worked with the Israelis before, and particularly when I was as a Deputy Commander of United Central Command, I had some background and some appreciation of the things that they were dealing with, and having spent quite a bit of time in the United States Central Command area responsibility, I was not a stranger to what was going on there. So it's just a great teamwork to make sure we put ourselves in the right place to be able to respond to deter a broader conflict, support Israel in its defense of itself, but at the same time protecting our forces that are in the region as well. And so the teams come together well to address all those.
That's great. One of the things that we've watched unfold over the last 8 months or so in Gaza is this terrible humanitarian situation. The UN said late yesterday that food and aid distribution to Rafah has been suspended because of the ongoing military operations, and that since the May 6th, when Israel issued the evacuation order, the situation has deteriorated significantly. So first off, we know that the JLOTS, which is the military pier system that's been in place now for about 6 days, that has been operational, we're told, since Friday. Has any aid from the JLOTS actually made its way to civilians in Gaza?
Well, the JLOTS is the Joint Logistics over the shore. We've actually brought over 600 metric tons into the marshalling yard, and some of that has actually left the marshalling yard into Gaza. And that's, once it leaves the marshalling yard, it's turned over to USAID, World Food Program, have been working that distribution. And so we are, helping to support to get the aid to Gaza, and then the distribution in support of the World Food Program.
So, but we were told late yesterday that by the Pentagon spokesperson, the press secretary, General Ryder, that none of that aid, I know that more has gotten in, because I think he told us yesterday it was about 560 metric tons, so more has gotten in since then, but that there seems to be some sort of a holdup. I know it's not the military's responsibility for distribution, but given that this is a military operation to get the aid in, a U.S. military operation, are you aware that it's flowing at this point to the people who actually need it? And if not, where is the holdup?
Well, when we do things as a military, we're part of interagency working with allies and partners. And so, we've done the part of getting the aid to Gaza, but at the same time, we want to make sure we connect the dots and connect to get the distribution to be able to move forward. And so that's, we've worked that with the World Food Program. And as I said, we've been able to move some of that out of our marshalling yard into with the World Food Program. Part of that is actually, I let them speak for themselves on what the challenges are. But I know that they've been working through that, for not only security, but also clearing the pathways to make sure they get good ways to move the humanitarian aid beyond and get it into the hands of the citizens of Gaza. So
far the JLOTS piece, how would you say that's operating? Are you happy with how it's going so far, the military piece?
I am. I mean, as you might imagine, we in DOD do a lot of planning.
I hear you do that in the Pentagon.
We do a lot of planning. As we do that planning, we also try to do and work to mitigate the risk to make sure we're going to be as successful as possible, and then also prepare for any type of contingencies. United States Central Command and the rest of the Joint Force that's been a part of this have done all that. And so, once we were able to get it into the beach and then start the flow, it's gone well. We haven't run into any issues of note, and so I've been pleased with the work that the team's done to get that capability set in.
On Rafah, I mean, one of the reasons that the United Nations has said they've had a hard time is because of the ongoing military operations in Rafah, which seem to sort of be moving incrementally, getting bigger and bigger. Israel has even said that they're going to expand them more. So how the U.S. has been very clear about Israel not carrying out a large-scale operation without taking the humanitarian situation into account. How is that going? What you're seeing so far right now, is Rafah, the military operation in Rafah, being conducted in a safe and responsible way?
Well, I don't have, I'd maybe defer to the Israelis on how they're conducting the operation. I do know, based on the reports, that a number of the civilians have been moved out of Rafah. The key part we were asking for as Israel was contemplating their operations in Rafah was to ensure they accounted for the civilian population and provided, shelter and food and the like as they moved. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how much of that's come together, but a good portion of the civilians have actually moved out of Rafah, just based on the reports that I have.
So, I mean, there's a lot of talk right now about the day after, which is unclear for what that's going to look like in Gaza. And I wonder, as a military planner, one thing, Dana Stroul, who was at the Pentagon, a brilliant policy mind at the Pentagon until very recently, she said that the planning for the day after needs to start now, and it should be done concurrently with the clearing operations. And as a military planner, what do you think needs to be done right now to start planning for that day after in Gaza?
Well, there's an aspect of what the military does, but it's also what happens in the diplomatic space as well. And I agree with Dana. It's all that planning needs to be happening at the same time. We often talk about planning and getting to end states. I'm not sure there's ever really an end state, but you got to plan for what comes beyond this initial piece of what you do. Mm-hmm. And so the key part here is what governance and security. Those are the kinds of things that need to be worked in Gaza to not only have near-term security, but if you're looking long-term, what do we collectively want this to look like years from now? And that's the work that has to start, and really looking at the options and having that dialogue. And you have to bring in, a number of different nations. You have to bring in not only the military but our diplomats for sure to help work through those details.
Can you envision any scenario where the U.S. military would be involved in some sort of a follow-on force on the ground in Gaza to help with security?
Not necessarily. I think the thing we have to think about is, as you provide that security, you also have to think about who's best and who's best equipped in some aspects to actually work the details on the ground. Mm-hmm. That has the working knowledge. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, we can plan. And we have ways to actually help, based on experience, offer some of our the ways that we've approached this in other situations and the things that we've learned. We're always willing to do that to help to make it as smooth as possible as those details are worked.
I want to turn to Ukraine. We've seen a lot of movement in Ukraine recently, specifically in the Kharkiv area. And I want to ask, you've been one of the people you've been very vocal about the need for constant funding for Ukraine and weapons flow. First off, where is the U.S. with the next large tranche of weapons? Is it close to making its way to Ukraine?
Well, first of all, it was good to finally get the national security supplemental in, so we can provide capability to Ukraine to defend itself. We could see kind of the movement on the supplemental, so we started posturing ourselves, and that's the other thing, is to try to be ready to be able to respond when called upon. And so we've already moved in, capability based on what was in the national security supplemental, and we'll continue our drawdown and continue to work to push that capability. So it's a constant flow of capability that we have going on. And we had capability going in even without the supplemental. Much smaller flow, but now that with the supplemental, we'll continue to push forward, and we'll prioritize based on the needs of what Ukraine tells us they need, and work our logistics to make sure we get them the right things as soon as we can.
So being that this is Washington, D.C., there's almost a certainty that there's going to be another argument over some kind of funding for Ukraine. It's only a matter of when it happens. So I guess, why is it that, why is Ukraine important? Why is it that you have found it so important that the U.S. continues to supply weapons and support Ukraine?
Well, you have to really look at when you have a conflict in one part of the world, it doesn't necessarily stay in one part of the world. If you really think about it, even this past week on Monday, we did the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. 50 nations have a vested interest in supporting Ukraine and providing capability. And if you just look at history, one small conflict can broaden into a much broader conflict. And that's why it is so important. Particularly, it's on the borders of, they're in Europe, but it's on the borders of NATO where we have an alliance. And so it's those kinds of things. When you start talking about security, you just can't ignore, different parts of the world. And it's kind of part of my job. I spend a lot of time thinking about all the things and getting updates on what's going on all around the world, because any one of those could be a spark or something else. But to have a country unprovoked aggression to change the borders in another country, I think we all should be concerned about that, and we don't want that model to be repeated in other parts of the world.
President Zelensky has said that Ukraine can sometimes see Russian forces right on the other side of the border as they're preparing to attack. And because of the restrictions, the end-use rules that the U.S. has set on some of the weapons, they can't fire across the border. And that's become an increasingly, a larger issue even in recent weeks, even with some former administration officials speaking out and saying it's time to change those rules and untie the hands of the Ukrainians. Are there some factors, again, as a war fighter, are there some factors under which you think you would consider loosening or removing those restrictions from Ukraine?
Well, I'm not the policy decider on this, but what we've been working to do is ensure that Ukraine has the capability to defend itself, focus on the close battle, and be able to use the not just what we provide, but what others provide to be able to defend themselves and have an impact on the battlefield. So we'll continue to work through those details, and I'll continue to take a hard look at it with the Joint Staff, with General Cavoli, General Gudo, who runs our assistance unit in support of Ukraine.
I know that generally the chairman of the Joint Chiefs loves to talk in public about their advice to the president, so I'll ask you about that. Just kidding.
I will talk about, I do provide advice to the president, but I won't talk about what advice I provide.
Oh, right, that's right. There's that little detail of exactly what you say. But I am curious, because if Secretary Blinken even seemed to leave open the door when he was in Ukraine a couple of days ago that maybe Ukraine would be able to start using some U.S. weapons in a more defensive way, if they're being fired on, in the name of self-defense. And I wonder, again, as somebody who knows the battlefield, do you see that as, is that something that could be really valuable to Ukraine? And if it's such an important conflict that the U.S. continues to support, do you think that it's tying their hands in some way?
Well, they do have capability they've been able to use. It's not U.S. capability and you've seen that they've been attacking into Russia as well. So, we'll continue to have dialogue on this. But again, we're focused on the areas that, in particular, the capabilities we've been able to provide have been effective. I would also highlight when Ukraine has had the resources and been supported, they're doing really well against a supposed bigger, stronger military. Mm-hmm. If you think about since the beginning of this conflict, they took back 50% of the territory that the Russians first took, and actually, the defensive lines that are set now haven't changed dramatically in the course of the past year plus, and that's because of the work that not only what the Ukrainians are doing, but it's also because of the support they've been provided by the international community as well.
So how can they, right now, how do you think Ukraine could gain a strategic advantage over Russia?
Well, continued support by not just the United States, but all the nations that are part of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group.
Because it does seem like it's been in a bit of a protracted stalemate, and it's almost become this war of inches, and it's been there. Do you think is there anything that could really turn the tide for Ukraine, whether it's a weapon system, or is there something that you think could really turn the tide?
No,
for them right
I
now?
don't think there's any like one weapon system that's going to be the magic thing is going to turn the tide. It's the combination of capability that's being provided, but it's also as they mobilize the force, and you know that they just recently changed their mobilization law to go from 27 down to 25. It's not only having the personnel, but it's also the equipment to go with it, and so and the training.
Yeah.
And those are the things that we're working on, not just for the U.S., but all parts of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group are working on that together.
So speaking of training, you were quoted in the New York Times recently about NATO trainers eventually making their way to Ukraine. We know several NATO allies, close U.S. allies, have already talked about that, and some even have committed to it. But I wonder if you see that as something that the U.S. could actually do as part of NATO while it's still an active combat zone in Ukraine.
I don't necessarily, see that during while it's an active combat zone. But if you go back and put this in context, before February 2022. We were working. The United States is working closely with Ukraine. California is the state partner with Ukraine, and so they've built really strong relationships. And so I do expect when this conflict is over that we will have an opportunity to go back to what we were doing before the conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yesterday in the Pentagon briefing, General Ryder said that Russia has launched a counter-space weapon into space. Russia today came out and called that disinformation or misinformation. I can't remember which one, but they denied it. But I wonder, can you tell us anything about what this counter-space weapon is? Is it, I mean, back in February, there were a lot of headlines about the potential for some sort of a Russian space laser or weapon. I don't remember where we landed on what that actually was, but is this that?
Well, I would just tell you, the space domain is much more challenging today than it was, a number of years ago. When we looked at it from a very benign environment where you didn't have to worry about kind of conflicts in space. As a matter of fact, naming space as a warfighting domain was kind of forbidden.
Yeah.
But that's changed, and that's being changed based on what our adversaries are doing in space and putting capability that's going to challenge us to be able to not only protect ourselves from a military standpoint, but you've got to think about all the things that happen in space that have an impact on our day-to-day lives. Mm-hmm. If you pulled out your smartphone right now and space went away, there's a lot of things your smartphone, you'd probably go back to a flip phone.
Yeah.
and so it's those kinds of things that, whether it's navigation, whether it's timing from global positioning or satellites that provide imagery to support natural disasters or military operations, all that would be at risk. And that's the thing that we're paying attention to. I think that's the beauty of the stand-up of the Space Force is increased our focus on space. I think it also, having been around space as an Air Force officer, it also brought down the classification level. So there's a lot of things we talk about more so that we didn't talk about before. And we're really building the expertise in the space domain, not just in the military, but I also say in the commercial sector as well.
But this specific counter space weapon that Russia has put in, I mean, does it have that kind of capability to have a broad impact on U.S. space? Apparently it's in lower Earth orbit, which is where the U.S. has a lot of satellites. Does it have the ability to really take out a massive number of capabilities like that?
Well, without getting into details of what capability we see from an intel perspective, but we don't want to have our satellites, whether it's low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, or geosynchronous. We don't want those to be challenged. We need to be able to defend against those, and so we want to make sure that we have the capabilities to defend ourselves, no matter what domain we're in, whether it's in the space domain, air, land, maritime. That's where our focus is as a military, and making sure we're investing to provide the capabilities and the expertise to do that.
Russia has strengthened its relationship with China, among other countries, but specifically on China. And we heard also from Secretary Blinken yesterday on the Hill about this, and he seems to be pushing more towards China is providing things for Russia that aren't just changing the battlefield, but may actually be even coming closer to a red line of lethal support. Are you seeing that? Is China, have they crossed a line here and they're providing things to Russia for use in Ukraine that the U.S. sees?
Well, I know that one of the things that I would highlight is their support to their industrial base, and not just China. In our national defense strategy, we have 5 challenges: People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and violent extremists. And the thing that I've noticed over the course of the past several years is they are all, particularly now, they're all active in some form or fashion, and in some cases working together. And we're seeing that, in Ukraine, where you had North Korea provide munitions capability to the Russians. You saw Iran provide one-way attack drones as well, and the PRC providing some levels of technology to support their industrial base. And so this is something we pay attention to closely, and it's one thing that, as the chairman, I pay attention to as well. And it goes back to what I said earlier. What happens in one part of the world, and you have these various challenges with international defense working together, it provides the opportunity for things to spread. And the goal here is to make sure it doesn't spread and make sure we deter any broader conflicts.
What's your biggest concern about this growing partnership between Russia and China right now?
Well, the concern I have is that, if you look at history and how World War started, where different countries were doing things in a conflict in different parts of the world, and how they came together to start a world war. How do we make sure that we, as a joint force, with our allies and partners, are well prepared? I think the one thing that I would say personally for me in my development is I've spent so much time not here in Washington, D.C. as a general officer, and I've spent a lot of time with allies and partners. I was in Brussels last week with all of our NATO partners, spending time with them. In the almost 8 months I've been in the job, I've probably had 170, 180 engagements with my counterparts from around the world. I average probably 3 or 4 a week, either phone calls or office calls. And those are hugely important because we have like-minded nations that all are focused on ensuring global security. And we have to do this together. And it's going to take a concerted effort and constant effort that we need to stay focused on.
How about the relationship between Russia and North Korea? They've been providing a lot of ammunition for Russia to use in Ukraine. Has that been a game changer on the ground? And is there anything else that they're providing that we haven't heard about, I guess, on either side, that North Korea is providing Russia or Russia is providing back, that has you particularly concerned?
It's mostly munitions, and I think it actually, in some cases, the North Koreans were able to provide capability. Well, as you've probably seen, that the Russians have stepped up aspects of their defense industrial base to produce. So it did provide them a window to get going. At the same time, what the Russians might provide from either sharing of technology, building a relationship. But I would also say that the PRC has a relationship with North Korea, and that may drive a little bit of tension between the PRC, North Korea, and Russia, of how those relationships come out, because it's more transactional than it is like the alliances we have with many of our partners around the world.
So you think China is kind of dictating the relationship between Russia and North Korea more than we realize?
Well, China has had a long-term relationship with North Korea, and you don't want a third wheel.
Yeah.
Sometimes in some of these relationships.
One thing that I have been kind of struck by, it hasn't got a ton of attention here in the U.S., but it's getting a lot of attention in the region, are these interactions between the Coast Guard of the Philippines and Chinese vessels of different sorts, Coast Guard or even in some cases civilian. I mean, sailors have been injured, Filipino sailors have been injured, ships have been damaged. What happens? The U.S. has a mutual defense treaty with the Philippines, I think since 1951. It's one of the oldest ones in the region. What happens if a Filipino sailor or Coast Guard member is killed? What's the U.S. response?
Well, I mean, I won't get into hypotheticals, but of course we continue to watch this. What's happening in the South China Sea, around Second Thomas Shoal, and the other features and islands within the South China Sea. And you're right. We do have a mutual defense treaty with the Philippines, and we'll see what scenarios that if we ever had to execute that mutual defense treaty. The key part here is that we continue to work together with the Philippines. Matter of fact, here at the beginning of this month, I was in Hawaii for the Indo-Pacific change of command and had a chance to meet with my Filipino counterpart, as well as Secretary Austin was there, and we had a quad meeting with the Philippines, Japan, and Australia as well, to talk about our security in the Indo-Pacific and the approaches that we take to work together.
Did you discuss the possibility of U.S. Navy ships or U.S. ships in some way escorting Filipino ships to help them with security?
Yeah, I won't get into the details of how but we do talk to them about how we work with them to ensure their security, and then also just to ensure that we can operate. And the key part here is we should be able to, for all of us, fly, sell, and operate where international law allows, and that's that's why you see the freedom of navigation. That's why you see that we fly where we do, is just to ensure that we maintain those norms that have been around for an extended period of time.
I want to ask you a quick one. We only have a couple minutes left about Niger and Africa. The U.S. troops have been told to leave Niger by mid-September is the agreement. I mean, I guess for starters, how do you see that the U.S. leaving Niger, and it looks like at least some leaving Chad and maybe more, how do you see that impacting the security environment in the Sahel?
Well, one of the things that we've been focused on is our countering violent extremists within the Sahel and West Africa, and we'll continue to do that. And part of this is when we work with the various countries around the world, we got to have willing partners. And in this case, there's some things where we didn't necessarily see eye to eye on, and they wanted to take a different approach. There's other countries in the region that we'll continue to work with, and spending time talking to General Langley at AFRICOM and adjusting our approach while we still be able to accomplish the objectives we have for the region, particularly the counter violent extremist area.
It does seem, though, that, I mean, there has sort of become this coup belt that's gone along the Sahel and West Africa, and where the U.S. has really lost a lot of its influence. I mean, is there, and it's areas where there are these violent extremists. In some cases, there's multiple. So are you concerned that the U.S. is losing not only its influence, but I guess its access to those areas to help squash some of those terror networks?
No, not really. Partly because it's opened up other opportunities for other countries in the region as well. I just know from the conversations talking to General Langley in his travels where there are other opportunities for those that want to work with the United States. Mm-hmm. And I'll just say, as I have engaged with our partners around the world, U.S. leadership is still is watched and it's wanted, and so doesn't mean that it's always going to be a smooth road everywhere we go, but it's building and looking at mutual interests with the countries that we work with around the world will be important, and there'll be some bumps in the road periodically, but I think in the big scheme of things, we can get and meet the objectives and the security objectives set out by our national leaders.
I'm getting a wrap, but I want to ask you one more quick one, because you mentioned earlier that every day you get these briefings and it's all these different places all around the world and things that maybe we aren't paying attention to. What are we not paying attention to? I don't know, today. I've been trying to get into your briefings. They still won't let me in. Believe me, I'm trying. What was something that you've been briefed on that I guess you think that we're not paying enough attention to?
Well, I mean, I just think, I don't know if there's like one thing. It's like, ask me who's your favorite child?
Yeah. Don't ever answer that one, by the way.
No, I won't. But you pay attention to different things for different reasons. And I think the key part for me personally is it's very easy to get focused on a particular topic of the day and then get your head down and miss something else. And so it's important for me as a chairman and with the Joint Staff is just to be able to step back from some of these so you can actually have a broader perspective and see if there's things that are connected, and then on top of that, not be surprised because you're looking a little bit further down the path and not get consumed solely by today. So you got to be able to do a little bit of both. Look at what's going on today, but also be able to look long, and then ask. I try to ask questions of our intelligence community and the staff of things that these things could happen. In some cases, I hope they don't happen, but we want to be prepared. And so part of that is actually kind of just pulling the string on certain things of what could happen and moving forward. And I think if there's, to really answer your question, It is, how do we look a little further beyond what we talk about today, of the things that can occur, and be looking on how we would address those and be prepared for, what might challenge us here in the future.
Well, I'm an excellent note taker. If you ever want me to come into those meetings,
Okay,
I can,
all right. Okay.
Thank you very much for your time
Thank you.
today, General. We really appreciate it,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your time, as always.